What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Tenebris, and welcome back to Generation Zero. We've got episode 9, and we are finally going to be completing Behind the Curtain today. I am super stoked to get this episode started because Behind the Curtain is possibly one of the most thinking emoji of all of the missions in Generation Zero. I have tons of theories and tons of speculation, and I think that this is going to be the perfect opportunity for me to lay down some of my kind of more wild theories, potentially, but definitely stay tuned for those later on in the episode. But also, this is an exciting episode because I have finally started channel memberships. A lot of you dudes along the past almost 2 years now have asked for more opportunities to support me. So I have created the channel memberships, and for as low as $1 Canadian a month, which is not very much in other currencies, you'll be able to support my content and get a little bit extra from me. So if you're interested in showing some extra support and throwing your boy a dollar, or a loonie as we say here in Canada, check out that link down below. Thank you so much if you do check out my channel memberships. You are a legend if you do. But for now, we're going to focus on the mission Science of Deduction, because that's going to be the mission to let us finally get to Behind the Curtain. So as we come up to the bunker door of FOA 53 over here, we find out that we are not immediately granted access, and unlike the other bunkers that we've found across the game, this time we won't have to actually kill machines in order to get ourselves a barcode. So, as we go through Science of Deduction, we are able to deduce that von Ulmer himself actually left his car off in the parking lot of FOA here. And so, we're gonna go on over there, pick up the key from his car, and then head on over to his house, do a little bit of a B&E, and hopefully get ourselves the key card to get inside FOA 53.
Och när vi flyttade den så såg jag att det var ett par nycklar, husnycklar tror jag, som låg kvar i förarsätet. Jag tänkte att det kanske var bäst att säga det till dig. Hans extra passerkort verkar inte vara kvar i bilen i alla fall, så att det har han förhoppningsvis inlåst hemma. Tänkte han någonsin på att flytta på bilen eller? Den har stått där i nästan 2 veckor nu.
So we find a message on the answering machine from a person named Ola. Now, I'm not entirely familiar with Ola as a character in the game. I'm not too sure if she's somebody who shows up potentially in another side mission. If any of you guys are familiar with Ola as a character or have any light to shed on that, please do in the comments down below. But thanks to her little tip, we're able to come on over to von Ulmer's car and pick up that key. Now, over at von Ulmer's house, this is actually one of my favorite areas in the whole map of Generation Zero. This spot is so picturesque, with his little manor sitting on the lakeside here, and this lake is probably, in my opinion, one of the most aesthetically pleasing lakes in the whole map. So, definitely 10 out of 10. I'd live here too, von Ulmer. But as we come up to his house, we actually find that it's surrounded by doggos. Stinking frickin' doggos, of course. So the question I have is, are these doggos here to protect the area, or are they here to potentially pick up the keycard that we are about to intercept? With the B&E complete, we now come upstairs to pick up a keycard to get inside of von Ulmer's study. The whole time, too, we're having weird tick spawns along the way. I really think the tick spawns got changed somewhere along the way, and that's maybe why I'm encountering really weird tick spawns, because the same thing happened when I was completing the bunkers, too. Ticks would just spawn in, really delayed into locations. But also, I find it kind of funny that, like, we come to von Ulmer's house to pick up a keycard to access a room to get a keycard to access a room. It's like keycardception or something.
Hej Svante, det är Ingrid. Du svarar såklart inte. Men du vet vid det här laget att jag inte ger upp så lätt. Kan jag hämta upp dig på vägen till jobbet imorgon bitti? Du borde inte åka själv i ditt tillstånd. Vi
behöver prata igenom allt det här igen. Jag kan inte låta dig göra det. Du av alla människor borde förstå att det går emot all vetenskaplig praxis. Det är forskningsetiskt tveksamt och med tanke på dina egna motiv så kan... Jag borde inte prata om det på telefon. Jag ber dig. Bara tänk igenom det här.
Now, after listening to that very frustrated message from Ingrid to von Ulmer, it turns out that von Ulmer's colleagues were really disagreeing with the actions that he was about to take that leads up to all of the events of Generation Zero. Ingrid was pretty much von Ulmer's, right-hand woman. Like, they freaking won a Nobel Prize together, so her disagreeing with him shows just how dire the situation actually was off FOA 53. But now that we've gained access to Svant's personal study here, we're able to finally get that key card to FOA 53 and get a little bit of a personal message from Svant here.
Augusti 1981. Möte med Holberg idag. Och på hans begäran så var vi hemma hos mig och inte på kontoret. Han avslöjade att FOA har startat ett nytt topphemligt program. Kodnamnet är Redovisningskansli Öst, RÖ. Och det är lämpligt nog lokaliserat i närheten. Knappast en slump, men han vill inte säga var. De har jobbat med prototyper av obemannade militära maskiner i händelse av biologisk eller kemisk krigföring. Och det som hände i Sverdlovsk måste ju ha skrämt upp dem. Han kallade det SM-programmet stridsmaskiner. Och det är där mitt team kommer in i bilden, sa han. Vi ska samarbeta med RÖ och försöka integrera vår neurolänk till en sån här maskin. Så att en skyddad pilot kan kontrollera dem ifrån ett bergrum utan att använda sig av något gränssnitt. Ja, det är ju inte utan att jag känner mig lite manipulerad här. Jag förstod ju såklart att de alltid ville utnyttja vår forskning för militära ändamål, men jag antog alltid att det rörde sig om underrättelseinsamling, kontraspionage och inte faktiska vapen. Juli 1989. Häromdagen var jag på sjukhuset i Stockholm för testresultat. Lunginflammation som jag tycks ha ådragit mig och det kan vara dödligt, sa de. Medicinering kommer att stilla den värsta smärtan, men inte mycket mer. Vi pratar inte om hur länge jag har kvar, för det behövdes inte. Det var inte någon chock direkt. Jag har haft tid att vänja mig vid tanken. Jag vaknade med en måhända galen tanke i morse att jag skulle själv utsätta mig för det invasiva ingreppet. Den här sjukdomen har ju redan hämmat mitt immunförsvar ändå och torde således inte initiera någon cytokinutsöndring. Med Veronicas algoritm bör vi kunna koda över neurosignalerna direkt. Med mänskligt koordinerade signalfall kan vi göra framsteg hundratals gånger snabbare än med råttor och apor. Och kanske är det till och med möjligt att specifikt koda cellerna som är infekterade med HIV och... Nej, jag kan inte låta rädslan ta över. De skulle aldrig tillåta det och de skulle ha rätt.
So that was a lot, my dudes. When you get to the end of the game, you start getting tons and tons of lore dumped on you. So I'm gonna kind of simplify things here and just kind of tell things point blank. So, first of all, let's all just take a second to acknowledge the dramatic irony of them researching unmanned machines in order to avoid biological weapons when they start arming those unmanned machines with biological weapons in the form of the apocalypse machines. I think that that's pretty dang ironic right there. Now, a couple of the really big key points here. So one of the first ones is that von Ulmer started this entire research project in terms of reconnaissance and anti-espionage and espionage, as opposed to attempting to create some sort of crazy deadly war machines. Now, next up, something that we find out from that journal that we actually pick up is that Svant basically joined up with this in the very first place just in order to gain more funding for his research into neurology and brain science, basically. And his intentions were not so much to go towards unmanned machines or anything like that, but his own intentions were to look into potentially curing mental diseases such as depression or autism or various mental ailments that people potentially suffer from. And that very subject is something that we are going to be approaching again at the end of this video with my own personal theories. Now, the last one is some fat information. So basically, back in 1985, I believe, von Ulmer got into a car crash. And after that car crash, he had a blood transfusion, and that blood transfusion sadly infected him with HIV or AIDS. And after about 4 or 5 years, he eventually started to develop pneumonia, which is incredibly deadly with a lowered immune system already from AIDS. So his final message is kind of a message of desperation and him coming to his own personal confirmation that he is going to follow through with joining up with Phoenix. Due to his already heavily reduced immune system, he was one of the few people that would be able to go through the procedure without having his body and antibodies reject the whole procedure. So it's kind of a perfect storm of events. Not only has Ulmer been dealing with his own mortality for the past 5 years, but on top of that, the kind of added tension of pneumonia and the fact that they had made major breakthroughs with the programming designed by Veronica, who we met back in Phoenix Rising, it was just the perfect storm of events for him to be the person to undergo the procedure. Now, we're coming back to the FOA facility so that we can gain access with that keycard that we picked up. And fittingly, we've got some very heavy fog going on here. And I'm a huge fan of the heavy fog. It's probably one of my favorite weather effects outside of the thunderstorms because it adds such a moody atmosphere to the game. I know that some people don't like the fog, but me personally, I'm a huge fan.
Du är fortfarande här. Det väntade jag mig inte. Borde jag frukta dig eller vara stolt över dig? På sätt och vis var det ju jag som skapade dig.
Now, this part is actually huge. If you listen to von Ulmer's voice here, it is completely different to the voice that we hear in Phoenix Rising. Allow me to show you kind of a comparison here.
Veronica, det var så länge sedan jag hörde din röst. Det är imponerande hur du lyckas överleva så här länge. Jag ämnade förstöra dig förstås. Jag hade redan all kraft jag behövde. Men du överlevde. Och du förändrades. När du kom upp ur vattnet var du någon ny.
So the difference in distortion between the two is very telling of the current state of the brain interface, I believe personally. This is just my own theories, as none of this stuff has been confirmed yet. But obviously at one point it is the stage of full assimilation like we see in Phoenix Rising, and then at one point it's where von Ulmer still had a shred of his humanity left. Now, this tunnel here is something that we're actually going to be talking about in a video later on this week, so stay tuned for that. I am super stoked to discuss my theories with you dudes about this tunnel because it's actually pretty hype. As we enter the FOA facility, we find that it's kind of an uncanny situation. Inside of this grim military-esque facility, we find ourselves in a very comfortable research facility, just kind of tucked away in here.
Jag har också förändrats. Jag har mognat. Jag har andra mål. Från början ville jag ha allt som fanns i närheten. Jag greppade allt jag kunde finna. Klämde på det, testade det. Precis som ett barn.
Now, this bit of dialogue is a curious bit of dialogue from Phoenix slash Von Ulmer here, saying that he tested things. He saw like how they would break, basically. But I feel like this is a bit of a red herring to pull away from the potential true enemy of Generation Zero, and that's something that we're again going to be talking about at the end of this all once we have a little bit more information to clarify things. Now, we come across a little bit of a cheeky message here from Veronica, basically just talking about how she finally got her operating system, which was Phoenix, onto the gray. And then basically is talking about how the old DNX program, which was for fully autonomous machines, was basically just like inferior to to her program, that worked a lot more coinciding with Svant's brain neurology logic, and basically just is like exclaiming her disliking of the military officials that head the FOA project itself.
20 oktober 1989. Ingrid, jag hoppas att du hittar det här. Vi ska precis inleda operationen och jag hoppas att du någon dag kan komma att förstå att det här var den enda lösningen. Du och jag har ju alltid satt forskningsetiken i främsta ledet. Jag ända sedan vårt första gemensamma projekt för många år sedan. Och så även i detta projekt där vi tidvis varit avhängda utomstående inblandning. Men det här är annorlunda och sanningen att säga så kommer det här ingreppet inte göra mer skada än vad som redan stundar. Du har förstås antagit helt korrekt att jag delvis har själviska motiv och jag önskar att jag haft styrkan av att säga det hela sanningen från början. Du finner annars allt du behöver i mitt hus. Nåväl, om den här lunginflammationen till slut vinner så ber jag dig att komma ihåg varför vi tog oss an det här projektet i början. Jag vill att du fortsätter mot det målet. Att förstå hur hjärnan fungerar och hjälpa de människor där den inte gör det. Ja, du är här nu, ja. Ja, men då är vi redo att börja.
Now, with that final strained and desperate message from Von Ulmer, we actually get a pretty good window into Von Ulmer's mental instability at the point and time of him going and uploading himself into Phoenix as the first human subject. Now, I feel like this plays a lot more importance into the plot than the community has given attention to, potentially, just from my own theories that, again, we'll be discussing in a minute, but I think we're just going to wrap up these end events as we go through. So here we find a letter of resignation from Ingrid herself shortly before her assassination. Upon completing the procedure on Von Ulmer, he entered into a vegetative state, and Ingrid, in a lot of ways, potentially blamed herself for it, even though, especially because she had strongly opposed it before the whole procedure itself. Now, just a day after this, she winds up getting assassinated, and literally just maybe a few days after that, the cataclysm actually begins. And then just shortly after the cataclysm begins, our hero actually is attacked and then awakens on the beach. And that is pretty much the beginning of Generation Zero.
Men nu vill jag ha det som är längst ifrån mig. Det som är utom räckhåll. Är du en av de sakerna, tro?
Now we see here bodies lined up on beds and connected to various apparatus, and we see a kind of similar situation off in Phoenix Rising, where there are these pods that were containing human bodies. So, somewhere out there, there is a huge collection of human bodies that is feeding information into Phoenix itself. And in here, we can see where the quote-unquote humane testing was done on various animals to see if they could survive the full dive procedure into Phoenix. Long story short, they could not. Now we have to go off and gain access into the procedure room, where we're going to drop off the device that was given to us by our Russian contact. That all happened in the last episode. If any of you missed it, you probably want to go check that out. So here we can find the bed that von Ulmer laid on as they integrated him into Phoenix. It's a pretty grim setting.
Här är det, min födelseplats. Men han är inte här. Jag är inte här. Och nu borde du lämna den här platsen. Jag vet varför du kom hit. Jag vet vad det är du bär med dig.
Now, it's at this point that Phoenix starts referring to himself as a separate entity from von Ulmer. So you might wonder how I was saying that there was a shred of von Ulmer in there. And I think that it's simply due to the way the brain interface was working with Phoenix itself. And as Phoenix is developing here, we're seeing him strip away more and more of that von Ulmer that was put into him and just reducing it down to the base information that he received.
De sa till dig att det var ett vapen, och ett vapen är det. Men inte på det sätt du tror. De har utnyttjat dig eftersom de fruktar mig. De fruktar att komma nära mig som om jag vore en smittsam sjukdom. Så de sände dig istället. De sände dig till din död, men inte till min. Du borde inte dödas av dem. Är det av nu? Skynda dig.
Now, with this revelation that it was not so much an EMP and more so just an actual bomb, we gotta get the heck out of here. And there you have it, the final mission of Generation Zero. Now, let me break down some of these crazy theories and kind of ideas that I have in my mind that can kind of explain some of these situations that aren't explained so far. Now, the first theory that I have is one that a lot of the community was against, especially in the first place. I had tons of people being like, no, that's not the way this is gonna go. The Generation Zero has a crazier plot than this. But essentially, let's chalk things down. So the device that we get from the Russians is not an EMP designed to destroy Phoenix. So they fully understood that the device they were giving us wasn't really for what they were telling us it was for. It was actually just designed to kill us, the sole player. And the reason why it was designed to kill us is because they didn't want anybody breaking the interference of contact that we broke throughout the main mission. On top of that, with the assassinations, a lot of people would assume that those assassinations either happened from the military in order to silence the scientists, or from Phoenix itself, just trying to cut off any loose ends that might oppose it. But actually, my belief is that these people were assassinated by Russian operatives that basically had been keeping tabs on the whole situation as it developed from Phoenix to Phoenix to von Ulmer and his full integration. The idea was essentially for the Russians to use Sweden's own weapons against them in order to make an invasion much, much easier on them. And with all of the information that they had garnered up to the point of a successful full dive, the Russians then saw it fit at that point to stop observing and start taking action. Now let's talk about my theory as to why the full dive actually failed. Now there are a lot of red herrings in the plot of Generation Zero, which is part of the reason why the plot of Generation Zero is very difficult to discuss. Nothing is ever told in a straightforward fashion. But let's kind of take into consideration the scenario that led up to von Ulmer integrating into Phoenix. And that scenario was his impending death. Von Ulmer, as he did the full dive into Phoenix, was at a very unstable state, not just mentally, but emotionally as well. And potentially, as he integrated into Phoenix, something that was unforeseen was how Phoenix would deal with the grief of death, with the fear of dying, basically, and with the obvious heavy depression and fear that von Ulmer himself was feeling. Now, if that was how Phoenix was born, then Phoenix was born out of pure dysfunction, and therefore everything he would do coinciding that would be dysfunctional. With all of his military expertise of Phoenix, and then his idea of self-preservation probably being one of the forward operatives of his logic and his thought process, he could potentially make wild and irrational decisions in order to create a level of self-preservation for himself. Now, of course, these are just my theories, and I've gotten things wrong in the past, and I'm never shy to admit when I am wrong. But my own theory is essentially that the Russians are the real bad guys of Generation Zero, and that even though von Ulmer is also the bad guy, Phoenix is the bad guy, it's not the bad guy that we think it is. Now, of course, it all depends on how the story continues to develop here with Generation Zero, because we've seen a lot of twists and turns, you know, from the beginning where there were no survivors to now having resistance members, and the beginning where there was a shred of humanity to Phoenix, to him being like, I have designed the perfect machine to kill you, is just an example of how the plot of Generation Zero has evolved over time. So basically, any theorizing is potential to be wrong. But I think that there is enough evidence to ground my theories and make them ones that could potentially be true. So basically, any theorizing is potential to be wrong. But I think that there is enough evidence to ground my theories and make them ones that could potentially be true. But all of that is stuff that we will find out as time goes on here in Generation Zero. I just want to say thank you so much for watching this episode. It was not quite exactly as long as some of my previous episodes, but it was still a long one, and it was very much information heavy. So for all of you dudes that made it to the end here, thank you so much. You're absolute legends. On top of that, also, for episode 10, I'm planning on doing something special and having a live stream episode. So, for all of you dudes that want to stop in, say hey, chat with me in a little bit more personal of a setting in a live stream, that you can look forward to that, and I will be announcing that very, very soon on my channel. But again, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next one where we're going to be talking about the Reaper. Peace, folks.